Okay, friends, welcome back to the Nerdy Pastor, and we are back with part 3 of our Reformed Theology series, and we're kind of doing this intermittently with book reviews and some other devotional videos as well. Eventually, I'll create this into a playlist to make it more in sync there for you. But we're going to continue today with the Reformed Doctrine series and talk in a connected way, hopefully, with the other discussions on predestination, God's decree, and then also creation and providence. And so today I thought we would spend a little bit of time talking about the Reformed doctrine of the image of God. So the estate of man, or how God had created man in fellowship with himself and as a steward of the world. So be fairly quick about kind of speaking about some other views that are not, of course, the Reformed take on it. What really makes it the Reformed take in many senses is how also there's many other connection points to covenant, to predestination, and to creation and its purpose, which makes it a Reformed doctrine. So initially we'll probably speak more on what is not a Protestant doctrine of the image of man. Then we'll get a little bit further into it and talk about some distinctives of the Reformed view per se, but it's Reformed given how it's connected to those other doctrines more than not. So first, just wanted to say that this doctrine, again, is connected to the doctrine of creation, the doctrine of providence, and the doctrine of the covenant. And so probably the next discussion needs to be the doctrine of the covenant and how that's related to creation, providence, and man's original righteousness and made in God's image. And then would come the discussion about the fall and sin. So just a few very quick notes that the Reformed tradition, along with the Protestant Reformation, pretty categorically rejects the view that in Genesis 1:26 and 27, that man being made in God's image and being given a likeness to God are very different things. This is how the Roman Catholics also have problems with the doctrine of sin, as we will see, because they divide those things up, that the image is essentially divorced from the likeness. And because of that, sin only really affects one of them, okay? Not the whole package. So what the Protestant Reformation would say is that we don't divide the image from the likeness from Genesis 1, that those have distinctivenesses, but they're interrelated, they're connected, okay? There's an integration of those things in how we think, in a Protestant Reformed kind of sense, and also just reformationally. Luther would agree with that disagreement with the Catholics. And it's a tradition that's been traced back to Irenaeus, though I love Irenaeus for some other things. We have to reject that it doesn't have a biblical basis, but has certainly has some problems there with free will and the total impact of sin upon people, and some other things too that will be connected to later discussions. So first is that rejection, I think, of the Roman Catholic perspective, but also the more patristic tradition in disconnecting image from likeness. The second thing that we would have to say we agree with mostly, but what need to say not so fast, is St. Augustine's view here of the image of God, in that he gets a lot of it right, in that he has what's been very well established and known as called the psychological view of the image of God, or the anthropological view of the image of God, where essentially the thought, the mind, the consciousness is seen to be filled with traces of the Trinity, the vestiges of the Trinity. So memory, thought or intellect, and will. And those things are seen to be the Trinitarian vestiges. Now, the problem with that is that, well, as good as that is, and helpful as that is, it seats the image of God in only the mind. It situates the image of God only in reasoning and willing abilities. It kind of divorces the body from the soul. So as we see again, St. Augustine, as outstanding as he is in so many things, there's this kind of Platonic, and we would say Neoplatonic dualism in a lot of St. Augustine's thought that we have to always be a little weary of. And I think in this area, it's a setback for a biblical view of holistic image of Godness. Okay, so again, we love a lot of what Augustine has to say here, but we have to distance ourselves from the Neoplatonism that's at play there, which seats the image of God merely inside man and woman. Okay, and then another thing we have to strongly disagree with, and this is not necessarily from any one thinker per se, but just a lot of the tradition, the Catholic tradition, the great tradition leading up to the Reformation, is that the image of God was only located in the man. Yet in the Reformers, in most of them, okay, so we're not saying categorically across the board, but in most of the Protestant Reformers, it's back to the correct view that the image of God is both man and woman. Okay, it's both man and woman are created in the image of God and called into likeness with God, and to be reflecting God in a similar and equal sense. That doesn't mean vocation. It doesn't mean role is the same, but it does mean dignity and status and equality before the face of God is on the same plane. The Reformers recovered that. Again, not every Reformer has the same view exactly on that, but I would say the Protestant Reformation and the Reformed tradition really recovers that equality and the equality of dignity between men and women, which is one of the main reasons Christianity spread so fast, is because of the dignity and equality between the sexes. And so we see that definitely taught in John Calvin and many others of the Reformed tradition following him as well. So that's just something to kind of say, this is what it's not. This is kind of what the main things we disagree with. We're not going to get into all the intricacies of the image of God, but I'm going to try to be very quick to kind of explain the Reformed tradition, then take a few minutes on how it connects to creation and covenant. Okay, so first is it needs to be connected to God's will and God's plan to image Himself forth as a mirror and a reflection of God in every way. Okay, in the sense of God desires to show and share Himself, as we talked about in creation, in a way that is authentic, but not necessarily parallel or perfectly reciprocated. God's God, we're not. So there's a challenge here when we come to the words image and likeness, given that, well, how much are we like God? In what way are we God's image? But there needs to be this very clear connection to God is created because God wants to share and to show and to speak. He wants to, as Bobbing says, disclose Himself to His creation. He's not His creation, but He wants to connect and to not just sustain it, but to be intimately involved. As John 3:16 says, He loves His world. So we need to always keep those two things in tandem as we talk. And also, again, this is the good purpose of God's creation, not just to fill it with stuff, but there's a rich intentionality between creation and the image of God, the Imago Dei. There's a rich connection between God showing, sharing, and speaking creation, and then creation's kind of king and queen, in a sense, are intimately connected with God. So it's not just human beings are important. It's not just the created world in kind of this general sense, but the general creation and the specific, kind of viceroys, as we'll say, of man and woman, and that being kind of the crowning achievement of God's creation and His desire to disclose Himself as the showing, sharing, speaking God who has created distinctively a world from Himself, yet has also connected by covenant and revelation His unique love and desire to both grow that creation, to flourish that creation, and to be intimately involved with that creation because He so desires to share Himself with it. It's just a wonderful, beautiful picture. And so we don't want to talk about doctrines in segmented ways. We want to always try to see how they connect. So what does it mean to be an image bearer and in the likeness of God? And this is, I'd say this is a very challenging doctrine to put it all together, but I'll try to be quick and simply say this, that when we talk about being made in the image of God, we are clearly saying that there's a presence involved with being an image bearer, okay? There's a physical, concrete reality that is making visible that which is invisible, okay? How else can Paul say to people, hey, you should be able to see God, okay? You should be able to know God just from seeing what He made. because there's a sense of, in the visible manifestation of his creation that he has done by his word and power and sovereignty alone, that he's not that, but you should be able to experience and see him in such a way that he's so intertwined with his world that you should be able to experience God in a truthful sense. Again, we're talking pre-fall here, okay? Where after the fall there's an accountability, but there's not saving knowledge. So we, again, try not to overdo it and get too involved with the next couple teachings, but there's a sense of his presence in the visible world as the creator is rich, is so rich that you can truly experience the invisible God in the visible creation. So the first thing we want to say is to be an image bearer of God is to be, in some sense, present, bodily, concretely real, okay, a manifestation of what is true, the invisible powers God makes into these physical and spiritual, beautiful, I guess, integrated ways of expressing truth. That truth is both spiritual and physical combined in an integrated sense. So to be an image bearer of God is to be physical, okay, to be a bodily presence, but it's also to be present not just with the Lord, but for the Lord. So to be an image bearer of God is to represent the Lord in his lordship. So we would use the terms viceroy, co-regent here. Think of Romans 8. We would use the term the royalty. There's a regality to being the image bearer of God. And we'll get to some functions of this in an ethical sense at the end. But to be an image bearer of God is to represent God in space in this very limited sense, in a very real way. So I don't want to overstate it here. Again, this is pre-fall, and there is some stuff to talk about post-fall. But to be in the presence of other people, God is in our midst, folks. There's a mystery to it. I don't understand it completely. But there's a mystery between image bearers of experiencing some truth of God's presence because he is present through his image bearers. Again, I can't qualify that enough just right now because we haven't gotten into the doctrine of sin and covenant and all these other things. So don't overstep that. Don't assume or jump to conclusions. But what we need to say is to be an image bearer of God is not to be somehow like distantly separated from God. God is intimately involved in his image bearers and expressing truth about himself through them in a mysterious way. So to be image bearers is to represent not just a spot in place on earth for God, but to also represent him to other people. Okay, so that's important to know that about image bearers. The second part is that we're called also to be the likeness of God. And these are some good ways to qualify what we mean by likeness. But essentially that there's two ways to discuss likeness. One, we're not God, so we're unlike God. Okay, we're like God, so we're not God, so we're unlike God. But then we're also like God and called to be like him. So this would be more in the sense of we're called to represent him not just in a presence kind of standpoint, but in the character, in the ethical, in the holy, in the righteousness, in the way that we image forth that. So we're not just image bearers, but image it forth in likeness. One, that we're not like God, so we're unlike God because God is infinite and we're finite. And then two, that we're called to portray with integrity the character, the holiness, the righteousness of Almighty God. And so those two things need to be connected together. What happens in the fall, we'll have to get to that a little bit later, but those two things are very connected. And so there's both a regality, a viceroy, a stewardship of being an image bearer, not just between you and God, but also in the likeness for others. So in the likeness component, we're representing God, we're commending God by our likeness, our mirroring of the holiness and the righteousness and both the original righteousness and the holiness and the ethical standards of God. So there's that image and likeness kind of connection together that's really important. And then lastly, we want to also define that it has to do with rational ability, all right? So we're not robots. There's a rational freedom that's involved. There's, again, this proper connection where the image of God is not necessarily just in man, but it is as man and woman, okay? So it's not just in the soul, but through the body itself too. As such, the entire person is connected. And I think that Anthony Hoekema's book, Created in God's Image, is really good on this. I'm just going to read a little quote that he has about this. He's talking about kind of that man and woman are created as creatures, but yet also as persons, and it combines both the absolute dependency of us upon God, our Creator, and the relative independence that we have from Him. And this is what he says. In sum, the human being is both a creature and a person. He or she is a created person. This now is the central mystery of man. How can man be both a creature and a person at the same time? To be a creature, as we have seen, means absolute dependence on God. To be a person means relative independence. To be a creature means that I cannot move my finger and utter word apart from God. To be a person, that means when I move my finger, I move them. So there's this rich kind of tandemness to the image and likeness of being in the image of God. That it's connected richly as a dependency upon God, but yet also it's meant to represent God in His world to others in a likeness, okay? With a freedom, with an independence, though within that absolute dependence and within the freedom of God. So our freedom and our independence are always situated within God the Creator, okay? And that would be not just a Reformed view necessarily, but strictly saying the area of righteousness and where it gets, again, a little bit more Reformed is how we understand sin and the fall and the connection of covenant, maybe per se. So this is more of a broadly Reformed Reformation view on the image of God, okay? And then another few just things to define it by is, again, there's that ethical reality that we're called to as the image of God, as image bearers, to an ethical, righteous holiness, okay? And that's not just to image God, but it's to image Him before other people. And then also the congruence and the integration of body and soul. Again, the image of God is not just in us, it is us, okay? There's that integration, that union of body and soul. Though I do think Calvin and Augustine's right in some sense, but Calvin's more right by saying we don't want to dissect these, but more properly speaking, the image is spiritual. More properly speaking. So he's not saying dualistically, but he's saying more properly speaking is there's actually this integration, but it's seated in the soul. I think that's a good way of saying it. He actually says this in his Institutes. I thought this would be helpful to read for you all. He says, also a reliable proof of this matter may be gathered, talking about God's image and likeness, from the fact that man was created in God's image, Genesis 1:27. For although God's glory shines forth in the outer man, yet there is no doubt that the proper seat of His image is in the soul. I do not deny, indeed, that there is an outward form, insofar as it distinguishes and separates us from brute animals, at the same time more closely joins us to God. And then he says at the very end, kind of a fun little snippet, I shall not contend too strongly, provided it be regarded as a settled principle, that the image of God, which is seen or glows in these outward marks, is spiritual. So what he's saying there is the image of God is properly spiritual, but yet it glows and radiates in some extent in the outward form. And I think that is a really important way to protect ourselves from heretical dualism of some kind, or to situate the image of God only in the internal mind, which has problems later down the road in Christian theology, and can't get into that right now, but there's issues and some collateral problems with that when we situate it only inside and not as the entire person. So Hoekema always says that the human person is one, kind of a monistic sense, not a dualistic sense, but a monistic sense, in that we're one thing. We're one person and creature. So there's kind of that integrated sense of that, okay? So we'll finish with this, and kind of give you a little snippet for next time. What really makes the image of God in the Reformed sense, definitely broadly Protestant and Reformational, but what makes the image of God in a Reformed theology is its connection to covenant and the doctrine of sin. So covenant is, again, kind of the game plan, kind of advancing the game plan of God on earth is what covenant is. It means a lot of things, but in this sense, it's what is the destiny of man and woman? What is the purpose of man and woman? It has to do with image and likeness. It has to do with being both a viceroy, steward, regal representative, a lord and a lady per se, okay, and then imaging that forth with integrity, holiness, and righteousness for a trajectory to glory. So we talked about that last time in creation, is that there's a trajectory, a functional goal, a vocational job that God gives in connection to his representatives that are both Lord and Lady, okay, to his representatives that have a regal origin, all right, but also a regal purpose. So image and likeness connect integrally to that and richly to creation and covenant, okay? So again, creation and covenant, you can't separate those things, all right? And of course, smack dab in the middle is the crown of that creation, man and woman, made in the likeness of God. So I hope that helps a little bit, but the Reformation view really strongly opposes the long, kind of broad Catholic tradition that divides those two things. It improves upon St. Augustine's view of the image of God being mainly psychological. The selfhood is psychological primarily, and it expands and broadens it to bring forth, I think, more integrity to the body and soul, that the image is properly seated in the soul, but it also includes and emanates from the person, which is body and soul united. And then also connects it more appropriately to creation and covenant. So not just, relationship with God, but destiny with God. And that's where I think the Reformed tradition shines, no pun intended, but shines forth in this. And so man and woman are created in what we call original righteousness. It wasn't added on later, as it is in the Roman Catholic tradition, and was standing before God, pure and holy, face to face, coram Deo, before the face of God, and with a goal, hopefully, to worship and glorify God all the days of their life by obeying what God has asked. And they were naked and not ashamed. Bavinck has a really good saying here, and we'll end with this, that when they realized that they had sinned and were naked, that obviously coming together as a package deal, sin and nakedness, the realization of nakedness, they were naked in a literal sense, yes, but in a theological sense, because their sin had caused their original righteousness, the garments of their original righteousness, to be taken off. And so there's this reality that ethical likeness and imaging is no longer the way it was supposed to be. It wasn't defaced to a point that you can't see it anymore, but it was significantly damaged to the point that there is no actual ability to accomplish the vocational goal any longer, both in creation and covenant. And so I think what we're going to see down the road here in the next few episodes is how that connects more and more and more with the great story of redemption, though set in the original context of creation. We want to see God as creator and redeemer. We don't want to overemphasize that he's a redeemer, because if we do that, creation gets swallowed up. And we don't want to overemphasize creation, because we forget that there's a trajectory of redemption even then, tethered in. There's kind of this stitched in effect of both grace and glory into creation that the Reformed tradition really picks up and shines in. So I hope that you'll listen to this video and be encouraged, and also like and subscribe if it's a helpful video for you and you'd like to know more, learn more. Until next time.